Akilah Richards is an incredibly inspiring force in the movement of liberation for all. Her weekly Unschooling podcast, Fear of the Free Child, and her network, Raising Free People, bring connection among parents, educators, and unschoolers, exploring unschooling, deschooling, conscious parenting, and self-directedness. Her voice has served as an insightful resource for our organizations to deepen our understanding and practices. Akilah's candid reflections and ability to challenge and encourage social justice-minded people, like ourselves, to explore privilege and power in their relationships with children have brought countless aha moments and much mad question asking. We're excited for the upcoming release of her book, Raising Free People. Akilah had shared with me that she's called to this work and greatly appreciates the level of connection and courage it brings with it. And we couldn't agree more. And we're so grateful for her to be joining us this evening. And welcome, Akilah.
Thank you, Rachel. I appreciate it. Peace, y'all. Hey, everybody. Good night. It's 8 p.m. where I am in Metro Atlanta at the moment. This is really good. I'm doing this practice that I recently started from all this Zooming of starting off by saying, I am an introvert who does stuff like this. So, so yes, I see, right, like y'all feeling me. So for me, these are really intimate, right? Like we're in each other's houses, you know? And so I want to, even though I do have some idea about, of course, the structure because of the time, and I want to really honor like what the flyer says. I want to have that discussion, and I want to leave room for Q&A and all of that. What is helpful for me is something more interactive. So I'm not gonna just like talk for a bunch of minutes about things and then be like, all right, Q&A time, okay? So as Rachel mentioned about like unmuting yourself, as we're going through things, there's a chat, and there are going to be folks like paying attention to the chat. So if things come up for you, put them there in the chat. Also, just a reminder to keep in mind that we have 100 participants on the call now. And even though that number may waver, just asking everyone to be really present about the time constraint of 90 minutes. So don't call in and be like, let me think about my question. You know, like try to feel it out a little bit first, please. And also know that if something comes up for you, just like I'm doing now, try to remind yourself that it doesn't need to be perfectly worded. You don't have to sound like you know what you're talking about. You don't have to use the right word or whatever. But what we're doing is togethering, like at home. We're at home together. So as much as possible, you know, try to make yourself comfortable and be mindful of things that might help other people be comfortable too. Yeah, okay. So I really appreciate being here. Thank you, Carl and Rachel, for the invitation and for your partnership in all these different ways. Like, you know, I'm really understanding partnership, not necessarily as an ongoing long-term thing, but it looks like a lot of different things. And so I appreciate being in partnership with you all here in community. Also really grateful for the Muskogee Creek people whose land my current housing is sitting on, and want to acknowledge that. And also really grateful for my ancestors whose, you know, bodies and energies have contributed to where I am now and where we all are. Also, lastly, really grateful for the opportunity to be messy together, right? Like right now, y'all know the spiel, right? Like, oh my God, we're in interesting times, blah, 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 whatever the phraseology is, you know where I'm going in terms of right now being both crazily familiar, right? And more of the same, and also very different in terms of what's happening for us and to us in all these different areas where we're getting to come a little closer to the realization of the impact of our being together, not just as ourselves, but how our understandings or lack of understandings of each other identity, culture, those sort of things, meaning, we're really starting to see how our lack of understanding around that is costing us. And what feels a little bit newer and a little bit encouraging is that more and more of us are intuiting, both from ourselves and collaboratively, out of just sheer levels of frustration and fear and love. We are figuring out like ideas of what we could actually do to move this thing towards change. Not just conversation, and conversation is important, but towards change. And I see a lot of parallels in the work that I have been called to as an unschooler, and the work that I'm called to as an unschooler who's inside of a broader system with people I love, some of whom have a similar background and some of whom do not, and people I care about, you know, who are trying to do these communal things and look at systemic change inside of a system that has not changed. And what I find encouraging about that is that systems are comprised of people. And so if you and I are sitting in this space together, having this level of conversation now, with the energy of what's happening now, a little bit of brave space, a little bit of finally space, a little bit of, oh my God, awakening space, these are the spaces where change can happen, right? And so what I want to do is offer what I'm calling like 7 lily pads, like 7 little leaps in the direction of raising free people, including ourselves. So what I want to do is just name these things, take a few moments to name them so that you and I are sharing at least this idea. And then I'd like to get some feedback about like where that lands for you. And then I'd love to do this activity while we're asking questions and all of that in the mix, where we'll take these 7 things that I'm going to talk about, where we'll take them and I'm going to ask a couple of people to volunteer a scenario, and we'll plug the scenario into these 7 little lily pad things. Okay, so that's my idea. And it's also why I'm here, because I want to be able to have this conversation at this level. And before we get into that, I'd love to ask folks, maybe we can take like 3 or 4 or 5 for folks to unmute themselves and tell me why you're here. You know, that's why I'm here and what I care about. But how about you? Tell us, not just me. Oh, yes. And feel free to post it in the chat as well. Yeah. But for anybody who is comfortable talking with or without your video, let us know why you're here.
Hi, I'll start. I'm Kristen Parker Yarnell. I'm in Miami, Florida. I'm part of the Miami Sudbury School, and a big fan of Akilah Richards. And really all the brave unschoolers, and I love what you're saying about just systemic, you know, change in a system that hasn't. So I'm here to see, you know, I love that reframing, or just the, I don't know if it's reframing, but you know, of how unschooling, deschooling, you know, looking at this is a form of liberation, and I'm just really wanting to know how to embody that and how to share that with an audience that often thinks of Sudbury or democratic schools or unschooling or deschooling as a privileged kind of thing, where it's really this like radical freedom. But how do we embody and share that? So yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for having this.
You're welcome. Thank you for that. Yes, yes. Anyone else want to share why you're here?
Yeah, I'll go.
Thank you.
So I'm new to homeschooling, have been thinking about it for some years now, mom of 3, 1 in college, 1 in middle school, 1 kindergartner. And I'm constantly on this roller coaster of, am I making the right decision? Because I have a college kid who speaks Mandarin and went through school the right way and is doing the right thing, but my other 2 kids are creatives and they're very different and they're free thinkers, and I want to support them for who they are. So I'm very interested to hear the direction of this conversation so that I can prepare my kids for the world.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, yes. Yeah. Anyone else? There are a few in the chat, so please peek in there as well. Thank y'all for putting those in there. Anyone else want to share out loud?
I'll share.
Thank you.
I'm here to have kind of like listen and have a conversation about how school and conventional schooling and schoolish mindsets are like the roots of some of like the core oppressions that like show up as such toxic things in the broader society, and how we can start to like address that and have a conversation about how schoolish ideas and school, how it has been done, how we need to change that if we want to have a broader change in society. And I want to have more conversations about the impact of that.
Yes, yes. You're in the right place. All right. Can we get a couple more? Thank you. Yes. Mm-hmm.
My name's Shiloh. I'm from Brooklyn, but I'm working with the Kansas City Sudbury School on an anti-racist committee. And I'm also here just because doing this work in this communal setting and being so upfront about these values and connecting in a community like this on these values specifically is extremely healing and liberating. And I'm excited to kind of enacting on this work is a part of the healing personally, and then also a way that I can really help others do the work. So, yeah, so excited.
Thank you for that. Yes, yes. All right, let's do a couple more if we have them. Anyone else want to share?
Hi, my name is, I'm sorry. My name is David. I work at Village Free School and I do flying squats in Portland, Oregon. I'm here because I feel like I want to support any kind of liberation work. For me, it's very personal, from a person of color, from an indigenous person from Guatemala and Mexico, and I feel like unschooling is just that part of sort of, it feels very natural to me. It's not something I feel like I had to, I mean, not to say it's like I know too much, but like I felt like didn't really have to learn it. I just felt like I just had to grasp the roots of me, and so that is why I'm here, and this is why I want to support this as much as I can.
Thank you, David. I appreciate that. Yes, yes. This is so good. And I would love, I know that someone else was trying to talk at the same time. I feel like this is really useful because getting to know each other, even in the tiniest little ways as we continue to talk, can make it easier for us to, even if we're not talking about the things that are coming up out loud, feeling any sense of connection to someone, whether it's like, okay, I don't know whether it's pronounced Alicia or Alicia, but I like her earrings. So that, you know, there's a little thing that, and yes, it is she. I don't know if, you know, your earrings are cute. And so there's a connection for me that's there. Or, you know, David mentioned Guatemala and I have a friend from there, and that, you know, creates something in my mind. So there are little things we can do to sort of make this not so like Brady Bunch squares sitting together thing. So keep that in mind as you contemplate whether you should or shouldn't say something, in case you're on the fence. So can we get a couple more?
Yeah, I'll share. I'm here with our whole anti-racism committee, I think is on the call in different squares from the Kansas City Sudbury School. And, you know, we're here to have a shared learning experience, as well as to really dig into how a democratic education can also be a healing centered and liberating education. So we're just big fans and excited to be able to reflect more next week about what we learn here tonight.
Awesome, thank you. Yes, yes, and let's do one more if we have it. Uh-oh, my light just fell. Can y'all see me okay? How is it without the light? Yes, yay, awesome. Let me turn it off.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rob, and I live in Portland, and I just moved here. And my roommate, Isaac, just got a job at a free community space to learn in new ways. And they just explained to me this entire concept about free schooling and self-directed education, and it just seems so obvious. And how did I not think this way before? And they've jumbled all the marbles in my head, and now I'm just like so on board, and I want to see what I can do to help. And all the love sent back to you guys, and I'm really excited. So thank you.
Thank you. That is great. Yes, yes. And there are also a lot of other folks who did put why they're here in the chat. So I'm going to close it out there unless there's anyone else who is like, let me go ahead and share. If so, please go ahead. Okay, wonderful. So I noticed that both in the chat, oh, and either Carl or Rachel, time is not my thing. So please, when we're getting like 30 minutes and 10 minutes, some sort of something would be good. Thank you. I noticed both in the chat and in some of what we shared here that there are folks that are kind of new to the conversation about what this is. And so if it's cool, I'd love to offer this kind of a bit of an overview for starters. Yeah. Let me unplug this light. I got too much going on over here, y'all. Okay, there we go. So start maybe like an overview of my story. So my daughters, who are now 16 and 14, started out in public school. And they were in public school for a total of a little over 2 years. And my partner, Chris, and I, you know, we went to college, we did all the checklist things. You know, I was like a fantastic student. You know, we both came from Jamaica. Our parents migrated to the US when we were children and have very specific ideas about like what it means to be American and to prosper and to, you know, start something that the reason your parents moved here, it's in a sense your responsibility to put those roots down. And then when we had our children, who are first generation Americans, then we just continued, you know, with that same thing. Our daughters, however, did not continue with that same thing. There was a lot of pushback. None of the pushback, interestingly, was showing up in their academics, right? It showed up in personhood. It showed up in what they were saying about their feelings. It showed up in when the first one got labeled as gifted, it showed up as her missing recess and her being really frustrated about missing recess to do tests. And those sort of things put Chris and me in a space of, you know, it was the original disruptor. It was like, wait, there are other things that are significant here outside of what's happening for them academically. Because we were thinking about the academics, even though they were just in elementary school, and thinking about their academic path and all of that. And so long story short, eventually, after about 2 years of them pushing back, we withdrew them from school. We like to say we broke them out of school prison. And then we started to just do school at home. We did the same thing just at home. And then we did that for a little bit until we started to realize, in combination with that and the girls' continued pushback, both girls, we started to realize that there were a lot of things that we didn't know, that we weren't noticing. A lot of ways that they were learning and picking up skills that we couldn't articulate how, and we certainly weren't the origin of. We couldn't even determine the origin, we just saw the result. So that happened enough times that we became confident that there was a lot we didn't understand about learning, right? That was the only confidence we had. Everything else was scary. Oh my God, still please use the textbook, child. I want you to learn. You know, so we're just kind of like messily observing while we're still like, yeah, what about math? You know, we did that for some time. And as we started to observe Marley and Sage more and see how they learned, and ask them questions and get basically more in relationship with them as people and not just as students, we started to recognize this thing that I now call schoolishness. You know, the way that Chris and I tended to put studenthood in front of personhood. We weren't looking at the whole Marley or the whole Sage in a moment. We were looking at what they were or were not producing. You know, we were looking at them through a very schoolish lens, which limited our capacity to be in relationship with them. That's what we learned over some time. So then when we started noticing some of the ways that limited how we were in relationship with them, it allowed us to start to observe the roles in that, like whose fault is that? So of course, at first it was Marley and Sage's fault, obviously. If they would just listen, if they would just whatever, then things would be better. And then it was the system's fault. These teachers, blah, blah, blah. This PTA board, blah, blah, blah. It was someone else. Like when they were in school, it was someone else's fault. When they were out of school, it was their fault. So as we began to examine the roles of like what's going on, what, you know, putting it in context, challenging, mad question asking, all these terms that came up for me throughout the process, that is when I realized, I don't even know how, that there was a thing called unschooling. Like other people were unlearning things too through their relationship with their children. And as I started to kind of see that that was happening in the world, I found, I think Charles Eisenstein had this thing about deschooling. And I looked that up and was like, oh, and in all of that, I just started to gain, both intuitively and from the things I was pulling, the understanding that what I thought was about a different way for my children to learn, you know, so that I can support them to be better learners and out of the system and, you know, prepared and all of these things. I realized how much of that was rooted in a very colonized idea of what education meant, what learning meant, what parenting meant, and what partnership meant. So that's why, as Rachel said, that I talk about privilege and power. I realized that this ain't had nothing to do with no education or the thing they learn or don't learn or whatever. This is about privilege and power. And that is in everything. That's in every relationship. So that's when I came up with this phrase, we can't keep using tools of oppression and expect to raise free people, because Chris and I were all the way into the tools of oppression bag, wondering why Marley and Sage wouldn't just like, you know, comply to this really nice thing that we've set up for them so that they could continue to be smart kids and get what they need in the future, right? So the more we continued down that path, the more we just unlearned, and the more we recognized that so much of our perception of parenting and education was tied to production and compliance, right? So that's when things like agency and consent started to show up, because it's like, if my kid doesn't comply, right? If they don't agree with something and then they don't do it because they don't agree with it, and then they can't trust me to not like react instead of respond when they say that, then like what's the relationship dynamic, you know, what's going on? So that's kind of the trajectory of how Chris and I went from, you know, great PTA board people to doing this sort of work now. And these 7 things that I'm going to talk about, it's EQCCCCC. That's how I remember the acronym for it. And so you'll hear me say that a few times. So that's these 7 things that I'm going to talk about. They came from my old knowings, like things that showed back up when I was able to begin deschooling and quiet a lot of the marketing noise of education. And then some of it came from being in collaboration with folks like you who think about this type of stuff all the time too. And a lot of it came from just being in a different type of relationship, becoming a more trustworthy adult for Marley and Sage. A lot of that came from there. And that's what a lot of this is, y'all, like learning to become a more trustworthy like ally for the children in your life. And plot twist, for any relationship you're in where you might be the person in the position of power, because that's how this is connected to liberation work. All these things that I'm saying, and we'll talk about them in a little bit more detail in a second, all of these things are about privilege and power. And there's no relationship that you're in right now, even if I don't know you, I'm still saying it. There's no relationship that you're in right now where privilege and power are not a factor. And particularly in this space, as people who are believers in and practitioners of, at varying levels, self-directedness and consent-based relationships intergenerationally, if we don't have an awareness of privilege and power, then we're not going to be able to work together, not only in the space of intentional learning communities, but in being together, in being in communities where people feel othered, and you're sitting in the space feeling like you're doing the things, like Chris and I felt really sure that we were doing the right things. Why don't the children get our intentions and what we're looking to do here? If you're not examining privilege and power, you're not going to recognize your role, how you are, whether it's embodying or presenting tools of oppression, and how that's getting in the way of your capacity to either be in relationship with or raise or otherwise support free people, okay? So I'm gonna read through my lily pad things. Let me find, yes. All right, yes, EQ, C, 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 C. That's hard, okay. So the first one is examine. And again, after I go through them, I was seeing the chat. Yeah, so after I go through them, I want us to plug in some of your scenarios so we can really work these. So the first one is to examine. And the thing that I asked myself, the prompt around examination is, I seem to notice that, right? So in any relationship where we're talking about privilege and power, that E in the EQ, C, 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 C is examine, right? I seem to notice that, ellipsis, whatever that is. Really powerful prompt. I seem to notice that, or it seems to me like, whatever that is, okay? The Q is questions. Rachel brought up mad question asking, thank you. Shout out to Rachel, really important. I replace mad question asking with Q&A because that's another paradigm shift for me. Question and answer. That's also a very like Eurocentric sort of approach to things, to be like, well, here's the thing and here's the answer. Whereas mad question asking is more of a like, yo, what is going on? Right? So that's an openness that gives you so much room to gather, to sort, to get mad, to be excited, to, as opposed to waiting for your answer, which you may not get, may not like, or may change, right? So the question is, the prompt for the question is, I wonder if it's because, right? So you examine, I seem to notice that, and then you question, I wonder if it's because, or let me look into, or let me get some education around, or how does this feel for me? And that one is particularly important, the how does it feel for me? Because as we look at decolonizing these spaces and decolonizing the ways that we operate in our own bodies, in our own psyches, and together, if we're not in a space of curiosity, if we're not in a space of wonder, we're going to make assumptions and we're going to go forward based on those assumptions. So it's really important to check in, one, to question, and also to check in with how it's making you feel. So not just from up here in the brain space, but all of it. How does this feel to me? I wonder how this feels for other people. Who else is talking about this? Don't leave your feelings out of it, because I was just saying earlier today on a call I was on, yesterday I did a yoga session, and the instructor, her name was Jasai, she said, feeling is listening. She said, feeling is listening. And I was like, oh, I was already on the floor, so I couldn't fall out anymore. I was like, oh my God. Like that, I wanted to offer that immediately in like every space that I'm in, because either way you say it, listening is feeling or feeling is listening. It's so important, because in this second one about questioning, when we make sure that we don't just leave out like what we're observing from an analytical space, but how it feels, the power in that is that we can, don't always, but we can then begin to recognize how those feelings might be playing out. how does this make me feel? And then the question that isn't stated there but comes up is, and what do I tend to do about those feelings? So for me, when my kid says that they don't want to read the textbook or whatever, if I was just focused on what to do about it, or I wonder if it's because, and I didn't check in with the feeling, then I could weaponize that feeling and, you know, like roar and hulk out and get mad and how could this kid and blah, 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 because I'm not even paying attention to the feeling part of it. Major decolonization work is to check in with your feelings as valuable and to recognize your feelings as a form of listening. Right? And of course, it's nuanced because feelings, it can also be dangerous depending on what we do with them. But what we can't do is not include them. We can learn what to do with them though, right? So that's the question. And then the first C is contextualize, right? So we examine, we question, and we contextualize. So in that, all I mean is the things to keep in mind, the ecology of the thing, right? To be able to name it and maybe even to blame it, but then to do something with it. So for example, no, I won't go into examples now because we're going to plug them in, but I will say a little bit more about the context to say that the purpose here of giving it context goes right back to the feeling thing. It's a way for you to gather as much as you can all of the things that are connected to what you're experiencing, you know, giving the context of yourself and your own background, the ecological context, you know, what is going on around with other people who are experiencing this, the context. And again, we'll give super specific examples so we can work with this. The next C is to confront it, right? I call that the nah, bruh stage. Nah, bruh. I don't know what I'm gonna do, but this is my declaration of not okayness. Nah, bruh, okay? So, and that nah, bruh could be about the whole thing, or it could be about how you tend to respond to the thing, or it might be what you've been accepting, like whatever it is, there is like a place where you're like, absolutely not. I'm confronting this thing or this aspect of this thing, and I'm saying, I'm not okay with it, or it is not okay. Very powerful thing to do, even when you don't know what to do with it. And we'll talk about why for sure. And where are we? C. Okay. Collaborate on it. So that's the next one. And that one is, the question there is, how might I change this? You know, whatever this thing is, how might I change this? With what help? In community with whom or what? Who will be or who might be my partners in this change? Collaboration, really important. And it may not be with people. It may be, you know, something connected to nature, and well, people are nature, but, you know, in other words, like think outside of a collaboration between two organizations, because it could be a collaboration with your self-care at a different level, which then gives you the mental space you need to observe how you're reacting and then do something differently, right? So partnership collaboration can look like a bunch of things. The second to last one, that second to last C is to challenge. Allow it to challenge you and stretch you, right? So you can sit with it, stew in it, study it, speak up about it, like whatever the things are. Challenge yourself to be with it, not to solve it. To be with it, not to solve it. Huge principle in unschooling. And if it's useful, I could give you like my definitions of unschooling and deschooling with the disclaimer that they are just the way that I see them, and the encouragement to create your own definitions as well. But yeah, to challenge it without looking at changing it, because again, the same thing like listening and curiosity, if you're looking at the challenge is not necessarily to solve a thing before it is to understand it and to be with it. What that is an invitation. It's an invitation for emergent structure. It's an invitation to gain new knowledge that might change the direction that you're going in. Okay, so that challenge is really important. And then the last one is change. And when I talk about change, I'm not necessarily talking about solving it. Once again, I'm talking about two things: sustained accountability. Like, so if I'm doing this thing differently now, and I've done these things, all these other steps, what does it look like for me to be able to notice and check in with myself and have someone else who can check in with me about this thing? What does sustained accountability look like around it? And also, what are my tools for inquiry? Because that's how change happens. It's over time, through scenarios of dealing with the thing and seeing how you're being with it and all of that. And so what are the tools that I've either gotten or developed, you know, or some collaboration therein, so that I can continue to be an inquiry about how this thing can be different. So those are the 7 things that are kind of the framework that I want to offer here. So I would love to open up the floor for questions, feedback, what came up, and then we can go into that exercise and some mad question asking as well. And please feel free to unmute yourself.
Akilah, I would just really like, my name is Zoe, I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, and I just want to express an immense amount of gratitude to you and everybody on this call right now. I have spent a few years teaching at a democratic school, of which I, about a year ago, left and have been called back into an intentional homeschool democratic learning community. And what you've laid out for us here, I think, is something that I never had an opportunity to put words to, but knew that we as people who are calling out the most authentic version of the children that we're working with and raising and the adults that we experience and interact with, just this framework is very powerful. So thank you.
You're so welcome, Zoe, and I appreciate that feedback. Good, good. Anyone else?
I have a question.
Yes.
Thank you for doing this. I have an 8-year-old daughter, and I just withdrew her from school 2 weeks ago. So we're newly to the unschooling journey.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I've been doing the research and signing up for every Zoom meeting, anything I can get my hands on to learn, because I'm so nervous.
Yes.
And my daughter keeps reassuring me like, hey, you know, you can do it. And, you know, I try to listen to what you guys are saying, like just take, you know, observe and look at what your kid's interested in. And it's like everything that I see that she's interested in or she mentioned, for example, it might be drawing or doing puppets. It's like I'll find something like, hey, you want to look at this online? And she's like, no, yeah. I don't want to. Like, I want to learn it myself. Or she loves drawing. Like, hey, you want to take a class? And she's like, no, I want to do it myself because I feel proud of myself. I don't want somebody to show me how to do it. So I'm trying to understand her, but I kind of check myself and realize like I'm kind of trying to live through her, because a lot of the stuff that she's telling me, I'm interested in it too. So I'm hyped up to do it and expecting her to like, come on, we could just do it all together. But that's not what it is, because it's like, I had fun when I was small looking at puppets. Let's just do it all together. Like, everybody should enjoy it. You know, it's just not that. But she keep checking me like, I don't want to learn like that. I want to do it myself. So it's like, well, are we going to do anything? Like,
well, let me tell you,
I don't know the stuff
of
you're
all,
interested in. So how can I help?
Let me congratulate you. Let me congratulate you on having a child who feels comfortable and safe to share with you how they learn, like what they see, what they observe about how they learn. That is great, because that can be challenging. What I would say is that, so you already have that great start for a kid who's like, yeah, this is what I need. Keep observing it, because did you say your daughter? You said daughter, right?
Yes, my daughter,
and
she's
8. At 8. So she knows that about herself. Continue to watch it like that. Your job is to continue to watch that, so that you can see, just like we did, all the things you don't even know that you don't even know. Because what's happening is it's trust building right now. Who she trusts is herself, which is wonderful. As she continues to explore, she's gonna find, so Sage, our 14-year-old, she's a gamer, and she uses this term skill cap, right? So that's a gaming term. At least that's where I know it from. to like, you know, you have to have a certain level of skills. You got to acquire those skills before you can get to a certain point. So Sage, for example, is she likes music. So she's starting now to learn instruments. And the reason she got into music is because she wanted, what's this, ambidextrous. She wanted to be able to use both hands fully. And so she noticed that when people play the guitar, you know, they move their fingers all kind of ways. And she's like, great. And now there's like 4 instruments that she's practicing. Then it turns out she loves music. Then she got into music theory. Then now she's learning to read music. And I'm like, well, why are you learning to read music? I'm curious, because you can play these things. And I see you watching the YouTube videos, and we got a tutor. And she was like, skill cap. Because if I taught myself these things, but if I want to be able to play it by ear or do such and such, then this is what I need. And she knows that she can say to me, I'm going to spend 6 hours just watching YouTube videos about it. I might not even get my guitar out. I might watch them just like this. Or I might spend another, 20 minutes with a tutor, and that's all I want to spend. But what we're doing is learning what each other needs. She knows that because I'm schoolish, I need to feel like I'm supporting her in her learning journey, because those are the words that I understand, right? Because that's what she says it. Hello, mother. This is and it's great because it's helpful for me to remember how ridiculous it is. But what your daughter is doing is, what you have an opportunity to do is be trustworthy. She can trust that when she says, Mom, I'm good, I got it, you're going to honor that, so that in the moment when she says, you know what, I don't got it, I want some support on this now, or maybe I think I do, that you're going to honor that. And then you become, over time, a trustworthy ally that she can then partner with on her learning. But we can't get to the partnership part before we build the trust. And that's what she's doing. She's doing that. And it's an opportunity for trust building. Does that make sense to you?
It does. It explains a lot.
Good.
Thank you so much.
Good. You're very welcome. So welcome. Anyone else want to share what's present or build on what's happening?
I wanted to touch on the change, and how you said it's not about always building solutions. So I've been really sitting with that in my decolonizing work, just like letting go of the idea that we're going to have a solution, or that the solution is going to come out of our previous tools. And I just feel like that's an important thing, because when you feel lost, or like that you might not be doing the right thing, that can be okay, and just kind of like sit in that feeling.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's a thing that I think we undervalue it so much, and it's a very schoolish thing that we do, because it's about competition. Like at the base of it, it's like, can I get to this solution? Can I move through the discomfort? Can I fix it? Whereas in the discomfort, in the messiness, in the language, in the rawness, that is where the thing that can change it over time, which is the real change, that's where that can happen. Now, there is some change that needs to happen right away. Not all change needs to take a bunch of time before it happens, right? There's some change that if we can do it immediately, but that tends to be either readily identifiable either by the people looking to solve it or the people who are affected by it. That's where the listening comes in. So for example, one that I love is Share Black Stories. Like that hashtag, that movement is Share Black Stories, or listen to Black women, or to Black people. That particular thing is, I think, really, really powerful, not just because I'm Black, but because it's an opportunity to say, since I don't have the solution, what is my process for taking in information? And in the case of like race relations work and the anti-bias and all these things that are showing up now, in the context of that, because that's privilege and power, am I really clear about what it looks like to listen, not from the space to gather the information to solve it, but to be with it and say, wow, there's so much that I don't recognize. And in that is an emergence of, again, the other steps. What might it look like now if I'm going to be with this? Who am I going to collaborate with? What does it look like to educate myself around this? So the more in a sense, like the messier it is, the more there's an opportunity to do the things that are going to offer the long-term iterative type of change that's really going to change like culture and not just like, you know, solve a thing in a moment. Yeah. Anything else? Anyone else? Okay. And I do see that there are things in the chat. Oh, did I hear an unmute?
That was me, but I'm hesitant
okay.
just because. Am I allowed to ask questions?
Yes, Carl.
I would be curious to see how you would plug in EQ, Maybe that was what you meant.
Like that. Yeah.
Something that's come up for us a lot that we're kind of struggling with is how we balance the kind of competing values that were presented with around COVID. In terms of wanting to promote like closeness and togetherness and like give each other hugs, you know, as like a one really concrete example, but then obviously also the need to like protect people's health in this like invisible way. You know, it shows up for us as a center a lot around like what should we even do? Like what kind of support can we safely offer? And like, does it make sense to do anything? Because of these like, the trade-offs are really murky. And I'd be curious to see how that might fit into the framework.
Me too. Me too. Maybe we can work that one. I don't know. How do y'all feel about working through that one together? Because I mean, this isn't a thing that you need to, yeah, good. I'm seeing some thumbs up. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna copy and paste because I have a note here and it's just my personal notes thing, not a formal whatever, but I'm gonna put the EQCCCCC in there. And let's talk about that one, if that's cool. Carl, can you, okay, did I put it in there? Yes, okay. Thank you. Okay, so to clarify first, you're wondering how that, you know, the difference between what y'all are used to doing or want to do and what's necessary now and how that's affecting like, you know, building of connection and that sort of thing, wanting to see how we could maybe work that through this framework. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and just kind of, it would be useful, I think, for me to walk through the EQCC in a concrete example.
Yes, okay. So then let me ask first if there's anyone else on the call that has another example so that we can maybe look at a few of them, because I want to make sure that if at all possible, we can address some that are useful in various contexts, right? So if nothing else is present, I'm happy to go with this one, but I'd love to hear if there are other ones and we can decide.
I would love to do something around screen time and like the balancing act of healthy limits and, you know, just I feel so uncertain about that particular thing with my own child, and we basically deschooled all last year, and now we're heading into founding and launching the Kansas City Sudbury School, and so I just have so many unclear feelings about screen time and just yeah. So.
Yeah. Okay, I hear you. Yes, and that's a very popular one. I certainly, is it Cindy? Is that who is talking? I can't even see the.
It was Beth.
Beth, okay, thank you. So Beth, for sure, let me give you some comfortable discomfort to say, and I see Bria laughing because we've talked about this many times in different spaces. I certainly do not come from the space that there is a healthy balance that I can determine for children around screens, because I know that my schoolishness causes me to think about screens in a particular way that isn't the truth. It's just my truth, like my opinion of it. And also that my anxiety around screens, a lot of that is from my lack of knowledge about how learning works. You know, I'm still learning that stuff. And so I recognize the anxiety and I've seen enough and experienced enough, not just with my children and others, about the usefulness of diving into whatever it is that they're into. Screens, I don't separate screens as another thing that I, need to look at differently, because I am learning how to trust learning. And I say that not to be like, I hope you get there one day because I'm there and you're not, but more so to give the context and to make clear that I don't understand it in a way of like, how can we get to a healthy balance? It's more so me as the adult, how can I continue to work with and understand what my anxiety is around screens, and make sure that I don't weaponize that in relationship to my child or children. Okay, but we could definitely work it.
Thank you. That's really
welcome.
helpful just to frame it in that way. Thank
Good.
you.
You're welcome. Are there any other ones that, just to make sure, is Leslie? I see Leslie.
I think what Alicia wrote in the chat could also be run through EQCC. She wrote about
okay.
Feeling
One
worried
second,
about
Leslie.
capacity, just in terms of balancing like homeschooling plus work plus the emotional capacity given the stress and demands from isolation. I'm sort of loosely paraphrasing, so please jump in, Alicia, if my paraphrasing is short.
Thank you. That was great. Yeah, I think just my partner and I didn't intend to homeschool, though it was, we had a lot of trepidation about putting our kindergartner in the public school system this year. But we both work full time. And so now we're keeping our kiddo home because we don't feel safe sending them to school. But at the same time, we both work, and we have so much isolation from our community. We have like heightened risk in our family around infection, so we don't see people in person very much. And so some of the resources I think that we would access if we were choosing to do this in another context aren't as available. And so I'm just curious about people's strategies for managing those demands, and especially around our own like emotional wellness, our own self-care, and showing up in the ways that you're talking about in terms of being a trustworthy ally to our kids, and also tending to our own boundaries and all of those things.
Oh, yes. Good stuff. Yeah, absolutely. I would love if, and I'm not forgetting Leslie, I'd love if towards the end, I'd be happy to share some of the things that I'm aware of, both from my own practice and because I have this podcast every week and have the pleasure of being in community with so many people who are figuring this out too. I can talk about some of that harmonizing, because there's no balance, but there's a harmony, and how all of those bits of the human and the logistics and whatever are factored in a way that hopefully we can get to some type of rhythm. Leslie, can you share what's present for you?
What was coming up for me is my commitment to pursuing my son's interests. He's 11, and how often his response is, I don't know. And it's just kind of like, okay, so he really seems to want me to take the lead. And there's a piece of me that's like, okay, get out of my way. I'm going to put together a fabulous plan. And I want to, so it's just kind of like, how do I do this dance? How do I not take over even when he wants me to take over? Or do I take over until he doesn't want me to take over?
Yes. Love that. That's a really, I like that one a lot, because that's a very popular one, and it's also it's messy, and I like that. So I would like to start with what Carl brought up, right? Because I feel like we're going to be able to work through that in a way that can touch on a lot of different things that have come up. And then I'd love to talk about screens a little bit more. And also a bit of what Leslie brought up, if we can, and close out with some of those self-care tips. So let's see. So for the first one, so Carl, you're noticing that, let's start with that first one. So you seem to notice that. Can you complete that prompt for us?
That it's challenging to live in integrity with our values. in the current context.
Yeah. And so, you know why, in terms of questioning it, like we know that it's because we're, you know, around in a named pandemic and the safety factors. And in terms of how it feels for you and how it might be feeling for other people, can we talk a little bit about that? So it obviously is something that doesn't feel good for you. It feels like something you want to figure out how to resolve. Tell me a little bit more about those feelings in terms of for you, and then also share with us a little bit about maybe if other people in your circles, what are they saying about that sort of thing, if anything?
Overwhelming sense of frustration in terms of like wanting to be of assistance and not having a clear path to like sort of execute on that. It feels really frustrating. And I think sort of on the flip side of this is we hear from families that need our support, the support that we want to offer, and similarly sort of feeling stuck.
Yeah. Anyone else, if you're in a similar situation or there's something that comes up for you in any of these, whether any part of it, examination, question, or in question now, please feel free to unmute yourself and just say, and I'm really good at, like, if you get too long-winded, nicely asking you to bring it back in. So please feel free. Let's make this as collaborative as we're comfortable doing. Okay. So that's good. So in terms of the question one, I'd also ask Carl, that overwhelming sense of frustration and that sense of feeling stuck, you gathered that from being in direct conversation with folks? Or are they saying that in like response to something? How are you gathering? How do you know that?
Well, the frustration is internal first. Just like the constraints, I feel like they're, I guess so much of my like personal satisfaction comes from getting something done in a direction, even if that's just figuring out, you know, personal things. Like it doesn't have to show up as physical work or like productive capacity. But in particular in this context, it's like, well, we still don't know, and we still don't feel safe, and kind of carrying that for a long time is where the frustration comes from.
Yeah, thank you. And so Carl said something that's really important. So he connected the feelings he's having to like a characteristic, you know, a thing about himself. Like, I know that I like to get things done. I like to feel like this. So that, whether that's a discovery or a naming, is important, because it can sometimes, first of all, help you take yourself and other people off the hook for like not having a solution. It's like, well, this is how I am about everything, and everything might not be solvable. Sometimes that's useful. And also just naming it, because when things are unnamed, they can feel scary. You know, the fear around them are stronger. So I'm glad that you did that. And then did I understand correctly that there are people around you who are having that same feeling, like y'all are talking about it, there's resonance, people relate to it, so it's not just a thing you're experiencing, right?
Yeah, and I think it shows up in families too, that we hear from. One, they're like asking what we're doing, and in case we can like provide an outlet, but they're also just facing a similar struggle, including like non-unschooling families around like, what are we doing with school starting, and this doesn't feel good. And especially for families that it already was kind of like iffy, now they're in this a similar thing of like, I know that something needs to be done, but I don't know how to proceed.
Yes. So, and this is why the contextualization is next, you know, putting it in context, because there's the obvious context of the pandemic, right? There's also the opportunity to look at the context of not only what the issue stops us from doing, but potentially what the issue could allow us to do. So for example, being able to all be together to do a thing like this, whereas before the push would probably be to do a physical one, which means that I heard someone thanking y'all for including people outside of the community in this thing. So there's an opportunity to include more people. So when you start to look at the context, again, it's not to solve it, but it can bring up just in that process the context, which can have positive sides, can have useful sides to it. We're able to reach more families, or more families now are looking at self-directedness, so they're listening from a more like a less, what are you talking about, that is sketchy space, you know, like when you put it in context in that way, it offers you an example to look at many sides of the thing as opposed to the thing that we're hoping to solve. Also, the context is that there are people with varying degrees of health concerns and different abilities. And this is an opportunity to have that conversation at a different level, the same way we're having conversations around race at a different level, because more people are listening. More people are also listening when it comes to ability and access. Like if someone can't get on a Zoom call, you know, like there are a lot of different things that are coming up. So when you look at the context of it, it's going to open the problem out from this thing to a thing that has legs and possibilities and opportunities in the middle of the obstacles. So that can be really useful. Also, the ecology of the thing, the context. So when you look at why, you also are looking at where, who is affected, who can I talk to get clarity. All of these things are invitations, essentially. All of them are invitations. So that's what I mean by contextualizing a thing. What are the factors here? Not about blaming it, but about naming it, and about, you know, seeing yourself and other people in it, and seeing opportunities in it that you might not see up front. Okay. So then the next one is to confront it. So if we're saying, nah, bruh, this is not okay, I think you're already there, Carl. This one wasn't an example of one where you're like, is this a problem? Nah, bruh, we're good. You're good on that one. But it's not always that cut and dry. And sometimes being able to have that declaration of not okayness is really powerful, because then it kind of moves you to the space of like, yeah, no, I'm clear. So then what happens now, right? So then the next one is to collaborate. How will I change this? With what help? In community with whom? Let's talk about that one a little bit, Carl. So we know that we wouldn't be able to change the reality of not being able to give hugs to everyone in a space, or families not feeling safe going to a school or a space. What can you do, or what have you done to work with that knowing, and to get insight on what might be a better option for people?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that sticks out for me is things like this, like through Zoom.
Yeah.
We just kind of sidestepped the safety piece when we get together online.
Yeah.
It's not changing the broader context, because we maybe don't have the power to, but it does change our experience of it, at least to some degree.
Yeah. Anyone else? I have a couple of other ideas that I'm wondering about, like, for example, things outdoors, things in large spaces, you know, with masks, like parks, like, you know, things that I'm seeing some people do. And of course, in different states, it's going to vary. But one of the things that I think about are smaller circles. Like if there are there's a group of people, for example, 8 or 9 people who health-wise feel like they're not in the at-risk group, so they would feel comfortable meeting up at a park and doing, you know, a group thing around a big tree for an hour together. That's something that can be done. Maybe the audio from that can be recorded and shared as a, you know, for other groups of people to connect with a sense of belonging and know that 2 blocks up there were people meeting that they can maybe get on a call with, or, you know, like creative ways to be with that sort of thing. And again, I'm really open to anyone else, any of us in this space that's listening, where you either have something that you think might be good for that Carl could test out, or what's coming up for you in this particular point of like, yeah, how do I go from feeling stuck with it to trying to figure out collaboration?
I have something.
Oh, thank you.
I work at a Sudbury school outside of DC, and we're on 12 acres of land, which is really beautiful, and it's got a stream and stuff. So it is sort of safe for people to be outside. And we've struggled all summer to figure out an in-between. And so we are doing like 3 days a week there. We've tried to make it as safe as possible, gone through lots of things to make, you know, just room capacity and things like that, but so that people can also be outside as much as possible. And we're doing Zoom also. So it's like a hybrid. But the thing that came up for me in this conversation is that my husband is high risk. So I'm a staff member that is going to be mostly on Zoom. And if I go there, I'll be there just for like an hour or two outside, something like that. And so when the questions that came up for me were more like, we're testing out this week like a kind of a camp, like a smaller version, and it's only like 15 students there this week. And then I did a Zoom, you know, on one of our days off, and I felt left out, you know, and I think some of the kids feel left out. Like I don't even think some of the parents told their kids that going to the school was an option, you know, and so I felt really bad after the Zoom. So I feel like you can then come to a solution, and then there's more questions, you know, or more things that come up.
Yes.
So that's where I am. Yeah.
Yes, because we're trying, and that's why I feel like it's helpful to look at them not necessarily like solutions, but like these lily pads. So it's like taking this one step in this direction, another step in this direction, because so much now is uncertain. You know, again, even if we did do a thing around a big tree in a big park, there are the people who can go, and there are also people like you is like, well, my husband or my whoever is high risk. Those are realities that we can't change now. But in the space of what we can change, one, we can name what we're feeling. So Carl, another thing that comes up besides like small group of, you know, for people who feel safe to do things outdoors, is also to create space to talk about this, like how this feels to be in a space where you want to do these things, but there's so much education in cultivating feelings. This is an opportunity to be with even some of the families. Someone mentioned, I think it was Zoe, talking about ways to support, or maybe you didn't mention this, but this is what came up for me, to support the adults in the space. Because we talk about the children, and of course that's important, again, because those are the people over whom we have power. But the people who got power over them are the parents. So if we're doing things, for example, doing calls where we're talking some about things like this, self-directed education and how that's broader liberation work, but also check-ins for feelings. What is the thing that's been so frustrating for you over this past month, so we can name this together, yell at it together. There's work around these so-called soft skills that we don't get because of schoolishness, that we now have lots of opportunities, even though they're going to be primarily virtual, to like learn how to together better when we can do it in person again, you know? So I feel like a shift in the focus away from what we had planned and over into an exploration of what is now possible is a part of how we offer this a context that allows us to confront it and then look at what it would mean to collaborate with people on it. And also to move into challenge, and I'm rushing a little bit because I want to get through the other few things. But I think when we look at that collaboration, then we talk about things like, oh, she got a spot out in DC. How far is that from whoever else is on the call that we might be able to collaborate on something? Or again, in my own space, what are some of the things that are really connected to like feelings and emotions? And I'm hearing so many people around me frustrated. Can I get with somebody who I think has such a high level of emotional intelligence that maybe can do a call, and then I can get it transcribed for people who might not be able to be on a Zoom call but can read, or, you know, get the audio sent out? What are the different mediums that I can make these things accessible so people can work from where we are? These are some of the things that we have to do as a new normal is happening and changing. And that's the challenge. Oh, sorry, go right ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I just want to add one quick little thing. I think, like, you know, finding just alternative ways to show emotions, and like with my group of kiddos that I work with, we haven't been able to see two of the families, but I have been able to see the other two families, and I'm potted up with them. Well, one of the kiddos, he's 3.5, and he's felt really left out, and he doesn't quite understand. His parents don't feel comfortable having him see us in person. And so we know that his love language is words of affirmation. So we write love letters to him, and we drop them off on his porch, and his mom helps him write love letters back to us, and she drops them off for us. And the kids really have found this to be like this wonderful way to express their love to him, because it just wasn't working through Zoom. He just wasn't, he was still feeling really frustrated, and he was like really mad that we were together and he wasn't with us. We have some older kids that were like, they were sad, but they're 9 and 11 and they get it. And he was only 3.5, and he was like, I'm really bummed that you get to be with the other kiddos and I don't get to be there. But ever since we started doing the love letters, it's been like a huge thing. Like, he really, that is his love language. He likes to say I love you, likes to get letters, and he's really into it. So just finding other ways to still, you know, get the job done. Like, that's been really effective.
Thank you for that, Anna. Yes,
Maybe
and that's
something like that.
Yeah, and that's what we mean by collaboration. So then you all are in collaboration with his love language, you know, which is such a beautiful thing. And we all have versions of that. And sometimes even just sharing stories like that can be very useful, because then even if it doesn't give us our own solution, it can remind us that, you know what, it's all kind of stuff that I haven't even happened upon yet. So let me continue to do all the other parts that I can do to bring this thing into my, you know, reality, to bring it into my awareness. Because oftentimes that's what we're doing. We're allowing the other stuff, the noise, to quiet so that we can tap into the intelligence that is around us, you know, in the shared space. And I really don't mean that in like a super woo-woo way. I totally mean the intelligence that is around, like what Anna just brought to the room. You know, that's one example. Also, other things that will show up for us after this call, we're tapping into now. And oftentimes when we get in that schoolish solution-oriented space, what a part of the problem with that is that it is louder than the wisdom that is around us, that we can absolutely tap into, so that we can collaborate safely, right? And by safe collaboration, what that means is that collaboration is informed by all the people who are affected by what happens. So that really speaks also to, and again, I'm rushing a little bit on purpose, the challenge part, allowing the challenge of it to stretch you and sit with it and stew in it, to decide, oh, okay, we're going to do this thing with this other school, and we're going to see how many people come on, and it's more people than we thought, so we're going to figure out the tech. Like, I'm in. When you take that approach of I'm in, then it's a figuring out and a tuning in and a tapping in, and not looking for opportunities to either affirm what you thought or push back against what you don't understand. Because that's what happens when privilege and power are not examined responsibly, right? That we push back, all of us, we push back against the thing we don't understand. Why the hell would her pronoun be they? That's a her, pushback. Why wouldn't my child do these lessons? This is the basics of math that everyone needs, pushback. Like, all of those things. So when we go into a space of challenging, that's like, what am I listening out for? How can I get more familiar with how this thing is making me feel? How can I settle into, not get out of the discomfort? Again, what you're doing is tapping in. It's an invitation, which leads us to that last one around change, not solution, but change. Tools for inquiry that are built along the way, gathered along the way, intuited, you know, throughout the process, and sustainable, because there's a sustained accountability, because you're in partnership with someone or a space that's going to say, so Carl, it feels like when we had our group meeting, you were really pressed about how many people we could enroll by this time. But remember, what we've been looking at is how many people can we impact during this time. And I feel like this is the direction we can go in to deal with impact. This is what I mean by the tools for inquiry, so we can check in with each other, and we have somebody who's saying, I feel you, because if we have more people enrolled, then we can impact more people. However, here's what we can do from where we are. And that's, you know, and Carl is trusting whoever's saying that because he's invited that sustained accountability. Because of the time, as I'm looking at it now, we won't be able to fully go through another scenario, but I do want to honor what came up with. Please remind me if it's Alicia or Alicia, or none of those.
Alicia.
Alicia, thanks. And Leslie. And who was, did Leslie say screens? Is that who said screen time? Or that was somebody else?
Beth.
Beth said screens. Leslie, please remind me what you said right quick.
When my child wants me to take over and do all the directing.
Yes, got you. So that's the one that I want to touch on right quick. So what an adjustment that I'll make, sorry, Beth, screens won't be able to get much more in besides the things that I mentioned. And I'm glad that those were a little helpful. That's a good direction to go in. Also, the Alliance for Self-Directed Education has some wonderful articles in Tipping Points, which is the magazine connected to the Alliance. And there are quite a few of those around screen time and ways to kind of manage be with the feelings around that. I encourage you to check those out. So the element of my child basically not knowing how to take this freedom and do all the free things with it. Really quickly, the analogy that is useful for me is I was in corporate America for 7 years, and it felt like 92,656 days, years, whatever. And I was so clear that I didn't want to go down that path. However, and I eventually was able to leave corporate America, but when I left, my setup, my structure, my mindset was pretty much the same. I got dressed in the morning to try to feel like I was, you know, going to work. I put myself on a schedule, you know, all the things that I was like pushing back against, fight the system, blah, blah, blah. I just took it back in because freedom is a practice, right? Freedom is a practice, and it's a trust-based practice. So while Pam's daughter is learning how to trust Pam for certain things and herself, also we're learning how to trust what we observe. We're learning how to trust what we feel. And so we're learning how to trust each other. So in that moment when your kid is saying, yes, it is appropriate to take over in that moment, because you're not taking over with the intention of, oh, you love pumpkins? Oh, you're going to get these pumpkins. I'm going to make sure that all across the board. That's not what you're saying. What you're saying is, this feels like a good starting point based on my experience and your consent. Let's go down this road. And this whole way, I'm listening and paying attention to any opportunity to be trustworthy to you. So if you say, oh, I don't care about pumpkins anymore, I'm like, oh, why? Tell me what happened. Tell me about these pumpkins, right? Like, so you absolutely can do that, because he's saying, I think you said that's what he needs in that moment, and that you're going to take that responsibility and you're going to do it from a trustful space, meaning you're going to honor whatever changes for him without putting your feelings or sense of completion in front of what he's telling you. Okay.
Yeah, that's great.
And I know,
that's really
and that's
helpful.
not easy to do, right?
Right. No, that's why I'm laughing.
Yeah, me too. So that, and then to what Alicia was saying about like what I call the harmonizing, right? Like this need to balance. We're all in this society of like work-life balance and trying to find this balance, and also the co-opting of yoga and all these other things try to tell us about balance. But what's useful for a lot of us, not just me, because I'm in a lot of support circles around this very same thing, but what's really useful for all of us, again, is to look at the harmonizing and look at how learning happens. So for example, for me as an entrepreneur, when I started blogging and moved from Blogger to WordPress, I didn't like decide that I'm going to take 30 minutes, or even if I did, it didn't work, 30 minutes 2 times a week to understand WordPress so that I can No, I stayed up until my head, you know, was like about to hit the screen, and I ate Pop-Tarts, and I figured it out until and yes, I'm an adult and it's different, and you know, we have to look at all of those factors. But one of the things we can do to care for ourselves is to take ourselves out of this conveyor belt of balance. Like, I want to spend this much time here and this much, and then look instead at harmony. How am I feeling in this moment? It doesn't feel good. I feel rushed. The minute, if it's not now, the minute that I have a moment tonight, I might turn in like 15 minutes early so I can really examine that feeling and be like, what would have been useful? Maybe if I had like my coffee or, you know, whatever that thing is. So maybe I need to move that so that in the kitchen, that's the first thing that I go to, or I wake up 10 minutes earlier or later. What are some of the ways that I can take care of myself? Also looking at throughout the day, what tends to be, I call them raw days, like raw, like the Hulk, like our raw moments. What are the moments when I'm like, if you say something to me, I'm gonna raw, you know, like, is that a certain time of day? Is there something that I can do proactively to be with that? Are there trigger things, like when my kid says, I'm hungry, you know, in the voice for the 15th time? So then what can I make the snacks that I'm okay with them having for now lower, so that they don't have to ask me, and that I'm practicing that consent to say, you know, you can have these snacks right here completely on your own, and if you need my support. So like, what can I do inside this new normal to take care of myself proactively and to be available for myself and others when inevitably I rar, you know, or something rars at me. It's just little practices like that, including things like this, Alicia, where you can feel heard and seen and related to, so that we're not relying on our kids to hear and see us and relate to us when they're navigating all of this too, and us on top of it. So that, I'm looking at time, that's kind of the broad strokes. And I think September put in here, thank you, September, the definitions for deschooling that I use. Yes, which is awesome. And I'm on raisingfreepeople.com. I do have a couple of the definitions there and a few podcast episodes that really go into those, like the namings of those things and beyond. So I really appreciate the time and space we held. I always feel like it's way rushed and not enough. But I also appreciate being in any community where people care about our intergenerational relationships and how that's tied to how you and I can relate to each other as humans inside of systems that can cause a lot of rifts that we're all trying to work through and see our roles and responsibilities within. So thank you for your time and energy and attention, y'all.
Thank you, Akilah.
Thank you,
Buy her
Akilah.
book.
Yes. Yes, please. You're so welcome.
Link in the chat.
Yes, please.
Let me
if anyone
put
didn't hear
that
that,
in there.
the incredible Akilah Richards has a book coming out that we all can pre-order. So get on that website and do it right now.
Yes, and I will put that link in the chat. I think it's going to be out maybe in about a month, I'm hearing, or a little bit less. So I'm going to put that link in the chat right here. Thank y'all so much for having me, and again, for your energy. I appreciate it.
Akilah, thank you.
Peace, y'all. You're so welcome.
Thank you to everyone for being
incredible.
here.
Thank you so much.